The libGDX setup has gone through several iterations. Do you remember this old setup app? Most people don't. This is the modern one that I was trained on. It served its purpose well, but as time passed, the needs of the community changed. The savvy amongst you will know that GDX-Liftoff, a third-party app, has answered this call. Originally written by CZYZBY and currently maintained by Tommy Ettinger, Liftoff has a great track record for stability and support for all the latest features. What you may not know is that it has just been adopted as the official libGDX project setup. Hooray! But as with all successful software, even Liftoff is seeing change. Welcome to the new GDX-Liftoff. Tommy and I have been working together to create a fresh user experience for all libGDX users, and I think we accomplished that very well. It's not just a visual upgrade. We have some new features and fixes that really make creating a new project a breeze. Let's get familiar with the app. First, you can download the new official setup app from libGDX.com. Go to Get Started, then click Setup Project. If this is your first time with libGDX, you should pay close attention to these instructions, which will guide you through installing Java and an appropriate IDE. A nice little perk of Liftoff being up to date with versions is that you can create projects with any Java released in the last 10 years, including the older Java 8 and the currently newest Java 22. Proceed to the next part of the guide, which will provide a link for the setup app. It's an executable jar file, which is just like any other program as long as you have a Java Development Kit or JDK installed. If you've completed the previous setup correctly, you should be able to just double-click this file and it will run. So, the window opens to the main project screen. You see the fancy animation with everything fading in. If you're in a rush, you can just click to skip the animation. Notice that the app will tell you if there's a new version to download. Most Gradle problems you'll encounter are resolved by having the latest version of the app, so click the link to visit the update page. Otherwise, we have some other helpful links listed below. There are actually two different modes that you can work in Liftoff with. You can use what I call the Maximize mode by clicking the Maximize button on the window. This isn't technically full screen, but it makes the best use of your full screen space. It scales up smoothly if you have a 4K or any kind of high-density display. This is a no-nonsense layout perfect for people who want full control and want to make projects quickly. If you leave the app maximized, it will start up maximized next time as well. Just keep in mind that smaller screens will not be able to take advantage of this feature. Press the Restore button to return to the normal view. We're going to focus on this normal view. Begin by filling in the project name. There are tooltips for every field if you mouse over them. So, you can see that you need to create a project name with these specifications. My project is going to be called Test Game. Package is a naming convention from Java to prevent your class names from colliding with classes from other sources. Typically, this is your website's domain name in reverse. If I was BadLogic, for example, my website would be badlogicgames.com. So my package would be something like com.badlogicgames.testgame. But you're not BadLogic, and maybe you don't have a website. Nevertheless, you should make up one in a similar manner. If you don't have a website with a domain name, it's easy to use GitHub pages to make one using their domain. If BadLogic did this, he would have the package io.github.badlogic.testgame. The main class is the name of the class that runs the rest of your project. Some people feel very passionate about what they call this one. I like core, but you can see some other examples here. As long as it isn't a name that Java or libGDX already uses, you'll be fine calling it almost anything. Calling it game isn't a good idea, for example, because libGDX has a commonly used class called game. Now click on Project Options. This takes you to the Add-Ons screen next. This is comprised of 4 components: platforms, languages, extensions, and template. These are the basic building blocks of your project. Sure, if you're skilled enough with Gradle, you can always add these later. It's much easier to include them from the beginning though. Look at your choices for platforms. Click on this list here. These are the backends that you want to include in your project, which determine what devices you'll be able to distribute to. You must have a core platform, and it's definitely recommended to have desktop, so that you can test your game on your computer while you develop. Each platform has its own quirks that you'll discover as you use libGDX. I'm going to select all 5 of these for our example. There are specialized platforms for unique use case scenarios. Headless, for example, is necessary for server environments or command line tools. TVM is a powerful alternative to GWT that allows you to use either Java or Kotlin to generate games for the web. There's a desktop and a desktop legacy. Desktop uses the current LWJGL3, and legacy uses the much older LWJGL2. There are sometimes reasons you might need the legacy version, but unless you know you need that, you should stick with the regular desktop. Learn more about these on libGDX.com. Languages are not a thing you should have to deal with as a beginner. For those among you that are familiar, these options enable alternative programming languages besides Java. If you are a Kotlin user, for example, you'll want to come in here and activate it. If you do choose Kotlin, there are some handy templates made specifically for Kotlin usage, plus some third-party extensions. Extensions represent the official libGDX extensions that you can add to your project. Box2D, controllers, and FreeType are common ones that I use. Note that the Tools extension requires the legacy desktop platform. That enables utilities like Texture Packer at runtime. I usually don't include tools unless I really need it. If you don't need to pack textures at runtime, you probably won't need anything from tools. In coding, we have the concept of boilerplate code. Similar code we reuse again and again without much change. That becomes annoying to write, especially if you generate a lot of projects like me. Templates help us combat that. Classic is your typical template, reminiscent of the notorious red background and bad logic logo front and center. Well, more left and down, I should say. The new default is much prettier. There are many more templates though. My Jam games use the game template because I have various screens for my menus and gameplay. I might want to instead use a simple application listener if I want to test something really simple and quick. There are other specialized ones and others meant to be used with third-party libraries. Some templates mention they use Kotlin launchers. These replace the standard LWJGL3 launcher.java and Android launcher.java with LWJGL3 launcher.kt and Android launcher.kt, among the rest, and these of course use Kotlin. Speaking of third-party libraries, let's go to the next screen. The strength of libGDX is in its community, and we have made quite a number of extensions to meet a variety of needs. These are made by individuals such as yourself, so they are not officially supported by libGDX maintainers. This list is by no means comprehensive, though feel free to click the link to suggest adding some of your own to the list. The list is searchable now, so if you want to include Unbox2D by Lies, all you have to do is type the name here, then select it. If you know the author of the library, you can usually type in the author's name instead. You can see that Tommy has quite the selection here. It also works by typing a subject like physics. If you want to learn more about a specific lib, click the link and you will be taken to its home page. Maybe I was a little too happy and selected some libs that I don't need. Checkmark Show Only selected to filter the list, and you can quickly deselect any extensions you don't want anymore. Moving on, we're on the final screen of the project setup. You're actually safe leaving these versions at their defaults. You'll change the libGDX version if you have a good reason to. In the past, there were problems identified in the release version of libGDX, so many users had to change their version to the snapshot of the next version like this. That's found by incrementing the current version and adding -snapshot in caps to the end of it. Snapshot builds are temporary builds of the next libGDX version still in development. It's not recommended to ship a project based on a snapshot version of libGDX, as snapshots are subjected to unannounced and possibly API-breaking changes. Java version has a very tumultuous history to it. This is the source level that you use throughout your code. The version you select depends on your personal preference and what the latest technology can support. As of writing now, Java 8 is the recommendation for most projects unless you want to target really old Android devices or iOS. In that case, you can use 7, but at least with iOS you can still use 8 if you carefully avoid any new classes or methods introduced in Java 8's library. I really like the language features of 11, and you might need that to support the latest Android devices anyway. Even though the latest version of Java is 22, it won't work unless you are only targeting the desktop. In any case, check the tooltip description here as the app is updated to keep up with the latest developments. The app version is the version of your game used throughout your project. Make sure to learn about semantic versioning. This is a great way to indicate minor bug fixes versus major changes as you update your game. Note that the release versions of iOS projects don't permit any letters in them, so you can't have a 1.0.0-beta and release that to the App Store. The RoboVM version is used for iOS projects. It should be fine at the default, but make sure to adjust this if you are using an older version of libGDX. There are some niceties as options here. If you can't be bothered to create a skin for Scene2D UI projects, you can include a default by checkmarking Add GUI Assets. As always, I recommend learning how to make your own skins if you're producing a game that you want to bring to market. However, this option is great for testing and quick little games. Every project should have a README, and this option gives you a basic framework to start with. It adds a readme.md to the root of your project and is used to describe what your game or library is about. This is especially important if you plan on open sourcing your game or collaborating with others. Liftoff also includes some instructions for new users here, so make sure to check it out. For advanced users, you can add Gradle tasks to be run after the project is generated. An example uses running the desktop version of the game immediately. You can do that with lwjgl3:run. Learn more about Gradle commands on our wiki. Finally, we come to the file paths section of the settings. Here we must select where the project needs to be saved. Typically, you want to make a new empty folder for which all your project files will be generated. However, you do have the option to save over an existing folder. This is a nice feature if you have already been working on assets ahead of time, for example. However, if there are any existing project files, they will be overridden. So be wary when you see this warning. You may click this button to delete the contents inside the selected folder. Next, if you have added the Android platform to your project back on the add-on screen, you will have to select the Android SDK path here. This path would have been configured when you installed Android Studio. If you haven't done that yet, go back to libgdx.com and follow the instructions there. Or simply return to Add-Ons and remove Android if you don't plan on making a release for those devices. Finally, you can click the Generate button to make your project. If all things go well, you'll be taken to the completion screen. Any errors in the project generation would be listed here with a stack trace, but you can see that there were no problems. We have liftoff! Congratulations! You have a new libGDX project ready for you to open up on your favorite IDE. If you happen to be an IntelliJ IDEA user, you can click this button and it will open your project right away. Otherwise, you can simply exit the app. You can always make a new project. You'll see that your previous settings have been saved from last time. That's great because you don't have to select your favorite third-party libs again, for example. If you'd rather start with a clean slate, click the reset button at the top right. Now let's talk about what files have been generated for your project. If you've never used Liftoff before, there are some changes to the project structure that you need to be familiar with. There's a greater emphasis on using the Gradle.properties file to change the versions of libs you use. This is a time-saving feature because these versions are used throughout the various build.gradle files. You have your standard build.gradle file in the root of the project. If you look at it though, you don't have the dependencies of your subprojects like core and HTML listed here. Instead, you must go to the associated folder for the subproject and open the build.gradle file there. You can see the box2d dependency here. If you have to add a new dependency, the documentation for the lib you're trying to use will usually direct you to add the dependency to the core project and the dependency sources to the HTML project. Make sure to create new entries in your Gradle.properties to make adjusting the dependency versions you use in the future easy. Continuing with HTML5 compatibility, third-party libs usually direct you to add an entry into the GDX definition.gwt.xml file. That process remains the same with Liftoff generated code. Some libs will speak about an HTML launcher class. This is actually now called GWT Launcher, since you can create HTML5 projects that use TVM as well. Peeking inside gwtlauncher.java, you'll see some tweaks and hints addressing common use case scenarios. You'll actually see a lot of these helpful comments throughout the project code. This is helpful for beginners and advanced users who want to make the most out of the Gradle project. There are some other nice bits of added code in a Liftoff project. You might notice Startup Helper in your LWJGL3 as in desktop project. This has some code to help your game run on macOS, as well as to work on Windows if the user's account name has any special characters in it. There's a native image.gradle file too. It provides an optional way of making osnative.exe or similar files. You do not need to think about either of those things at all when starting out, but if you do need them, they'll be there. Let's talk about how to run your project in IntelliJ IDEA. Old tutorials talked about setting up your own run configuration and choosing the assets folder manually. That's no longer necessary. Just click to open your Gradle menu and expand LWJGL3, Tasks, Application, Run. Your game then builds and finally runs. Close the game and look above here. You'll see that it has created a run configuration for you. You can now just click the Run button to test your game. Click the Debug button to enable debugging mode. This process is the same for any Gradle commands you need to run. For example, you can make an executable jar of the desktop version of your game by opening LWJGL3, Distribution, Dist Zip. Find the output in your project folder, LWJGL3, Build, Distributions. You can upload this to itch, for example. Now you may choose from any run configuration you've used before from this list if you need to run them again. Recently added to Liftoff is support for Construo, which lets you build nice and shiny release executables. That's executables plural, because it can make Windows, macOS, and the Linux programs from whatever OS you're currently using. Take that, old JPackage tutorial I made! Find the output in LWJGL3, Build, Construo, Dist. One advanced technique you can use is to use Liftoff to update your old project dependencies, versions, and build files. This is a great way to update from an ancient project to use modern Gradle dependencies. The way you could do this is to start creating a new project in Liftoff. Make sure that the package name is different or slightly different from your original project. Make your selections. Maybe this time I want to include FreeType. Then choose the folder for your existing project. Then generate. You'll notice that all the build files have been overwritten. However, your old project code still exists in the previous package folders. It is then your job to copy these classes, refactoring their package names as you go. I suggest doing it in piecemeal so you can catch any API changes from modern libGDX. Just please, back up your project before you do something as serious as this. That's all I have for GDX Liftoff. Please refer to libGDX.com and the wiki for any new developments in project generation. Keep the skies clear and check your corners, amigos.